it's for real.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Nostalgia Crackdown here on the Let's Get Ready Network. I'm Adelia, and I'm here with my buddy Josh, and this month we are talking about the best rivalries in the Schmoedown. Josh, how you doing tonight? You're on mute.
Sorry about that. I'm doing great. I'm excited to talk about the top rivalries from the Schmoedown, and we're going to do a similar format as last week because we like the last week format so much. I'll give my top five. Delia will give her top five, and we'll react to each other's choices.
Sounds like a plan. I went first last time, so how about you go first this time? So, Josh, let's start with your number five.
Sounds good. So my number five is the rivalry between Winston Marshall and Shannon Barney. This really happened during the first year of the digital season, the first year of the faction system. And there was these two great new managers, and it just instantly they were fighting for the top of the faction title, which I was very invested in at the time. But it also felt like they just were great playing off each other character wise. It really felt like every single corruption versus swag match had a bit of flavor, and you definitely had a side you were rooting for, whether it was swag or corruption. I don't think we had a lot of fans that were like hardcore corruption and swag fans. So it really felt like each match mattered because of the faction race, but also you're watching two new managers, first year managing, to honestly just come onto the scene and do a fantastic job and instantly be like, oh, we're both stars basically in the Schmoedown right now, even though it's our first year. And it was always just a joy to watch them because they were not only great managers to their players, but they were very entertaining to the crowd and they were great performers. And there's just so many moments where they're bouncing off each other and just feel so natural. And sometimes the manager moments kind of take away from the match at moments you could feel looking back at some of the Schmoedown matches, but this never felt the case when it was a Winston versus a Shannon match.
Yeah, they had great chemistry playing off each other. I enjoyed their back and forth in the pre-match interview sometimes more than I enjoyed the match. This is a great rivalry and one that, they never played a match against each other personally, but they played so many matches against each other as managers, and it's just really one of the great managerial rivalries we ever saw.
Absolutely. And I do feel like what also made the rivalry so great was also because we're going to get into rivalries where the opponents probably don't respect each other as much. You could definitely feel the respect. Like they were jabbing at each other and going back and forth, but there was definitely a mutual respect of like, oh, the Shannon's really good and Winston's really good. They both know they're both really good, and they both know that they've got to respect one another. But that doesn't stop them getting the jabs in, which was incredible. I always, you might also notice this from my list. I love rivalries where there's respect both ways, where it's just both sides clearly know they have to like have a real fear towards the other.
Absolutely. Great first pick here, Josh. Let's go to my number five. Now, my number five is from the Star Wars division, and they only played the one match against each other, but their back and forth throughout the entire season that this went on was so great. It's a shame that they never got a second match, and that's Thomas Harper and Gold Leader. The one match they played was an excellent match. It was the finals of the first Star Wars tournament in season 8, but the back and forth that existed between them on Twitter and in the Schmoedown Facebook group and just basically everywhere that wasn't the Schmoedown proper was just so fantastic and fun to watch and follow along with, and it just enough to make it my number five.
Absolutely. I mean, you say they only have one match, but it doesn't feel that way just because of all the content of them going back and forth. Whether you watch a Schmoedown after show and they're being interviewed, you know one of them is going to take a shot at the other. On Twitter, it's like what I always love is when players play into it on Twitter a little because sometimes you get a nugget that some other fans don't when you're heading into that match to help enjoy the match. When a good Schmoedown Twitter post from a competitor can really get you hyped and excited for a match. And these two, it never felt like, oh, they're just promoting their match. They have to say something. They were always entertaining. They were both great at the character stuff. and it was a clear rivalry that was it really felt. I don't know the words to say, but again, the first match was great. We were wanting more, and what probably would have gotten more. The Schmoedown went on a bit longer. Sadly, both these players were at the end of the Schmoedown's run, and Harper retired on the last season. But I this is definitely sometimes a rivalry doesn't have to be a million matches of these two going back and forth and back and forth. Sometimes you can just have a rivalry where it's like it's clear these two have a history and that they have opinions on each other, and this is a rivalry that definitely gives the audience wanting more rather than like, oh man, we're on 10 matches of this rivalry alone. We're already like we're ready to move on. Well, this one, it's good, I think, for a rivalry that kind of have the audience always wanting more and looking forward to the next match, and that's definitely what this one did.
Absolutely. Now, for the next ones, your number 4 and my number 3 are the same. So we're going to just skip to my number 4 real quick. And that was the Patriots versus Above the Line. These two teams played, in my opinion, the greatest trilogy of matches we ever saw in the teams division. They were super competitive. The back and forth between Snyder and JTE and Sam Levine and Drew McWeeny was so great leading up to these matches, culminating, of course, in that Iron Man match. Above the Line won 2 out of the 3, which I don't think many people realize. And I didn't have enough time to do the research, but they might be one of, if not the only team to have a winning record against the Patriots. So I just love this team's rivalry so much.
I mean, they have to be because I mean the Patriots' only losses have to be Above the Line, right? I can't remember the Patriots losing another match other than Above the Line.
I think you might be right about that, but let me double check.
Yeah, so what I love about this rivalry is not only was this a rivalry in the moment that was great, but it's also a rivalry that I think changed the league because this was feeling like a changing of the guard, if you will, in the teams division, where the teams division for a lot while it was a one teams division. The Patriots were just ahead of everyone else. They kind of knew what they were. It's like no one felt like they could kind of like hold the consistency that the Patriots had. It always felt like, well, the Patriots aren't going to mess up and the other team will. The teams division was filled with great teams, but inconsistent teams where it's like, okay, we're just waiting for the mess up. We're just waiting for the miss. As soon as Above the Line came in and after they won the title, it felt like the teams' divisions shifted a lot. It felt like the teams accuracy wise skyrocketed, and it also felt like the matches weren't like, oh, okay, the non-champs going to make a mistake. It's like it would be two people where it's like, is anyone going to make a mistake? After that, we got champions like Shire Wolves, Corruption, Founding Fathers, Shazam. Shazam is being probably the best example of it, where it was like it didn't feel like Shazam would ever make a mistake. It felt like they were going to go perfect. Odd Couple. It's like all these teams that like felt the amount of different challengers, even some of the teams that didn't win it, whether it was the Ethan Irwin, Liz Shannon Miller team. Um, my brain's not working. I'm trying to think of more off the top of my head, but they're
Final
also
Exam.
Yes, Final Exam's a great example where it's like even those teams, like when it compares to the challengers that the Patriots faced, and that's why some people hold that against the Patriots. It felt like the team's division, as soon as Above the Line came in, entirely stepped up its game, and it felt like the challengers and the champions were just like, "Oh, no one's going to make a mistake." Everyone has the consistency that the Patriots had in the previous one.
Yeah, and I did just check. The 2 losses to Above the Line are the only 2 losses the Patriots ever had. So it's just the phenomenal trilogy of matches between these two teams, and like I still like to go back and rewatch them because they're so good.
And also, I'll also quickly say this rivalry, in my opinion, probably ended. Although that we had that historic Iron Man match, I think that Iron Man match ended Iron Man matches for the rest of the league for the most part because we don't see a lot or if any Iron Man matches after this.
I think we have another one after that.
And I think I remember Christian.
I think we have an Iron Man Jurassic Park match, but that's an exhibition.
Yes,
I don't think we have another league match.
I think, and I could be wrong. I think I remember Christian saying that he was kind of disappointed with that Iron Man match because it felt like the Patriots' strength this was such a great rivalry, and it felt like the Iron Man format favored Above the Line, and it didn't showcase the strength of the game and the Schmoedown of the 5-round format and stuff like that. That after that Iron Man match, it was like because this was such a great rivalry, and that's the way it ended. Almost like, well, I don't know if it what I'm trying to remember the feeling, but I felt like the feeling was, well, if it's an Iron Man match, it's going to favor the above the line. So like I think that was like partially the general consensus, although no one would count out the Patriots just because of how dominant and how winning they were. But it felt like this rivalry was so great that because it ended on an Iron Man match, that it almost ended Iron Man matches for the rest of the league because of it feeling, I don't want to say like a bad way to end the trilogy, but like not as satisfying as it could be if it was another 5 round format.
Yeah, it would have been interesting if it had been another 5 round match.
Hmm.
But we'll never know who would have
Hmm.
won that match. All right, let's move on to your number 4, my number 3. You go ahead and talk about them first.
Sounds good. Oh, I actually took this one out, so this one's not even
You
in
took
mine
this one
anymore.
out?
Yes.
Okay. Well,
So
what
I
is
this
your
was
number
like a
4
last
then?
minute cut. This was a last minute cut.
All right,
My
well, what's
number
your number
4 is
4?
actually Irwin versus Merle.
Irwin versus Merle. Okay, talk about Irwin versus Merle.
Yeah, so my I'll talk about why I cut that one out in the end.
Okay.
But once we get there, but Irwin versus Merle was one of my personal favorite ones. I don't think I can put it higher than 4 because the other 3 are so historic in my opinion. But I love this, felt like the best rivalry between two faces. The respect between the two, and you just knew every single time you were getting this, except for the first match, which was a TKO. But once Dan won the title back from Irwin in New York, that live event, which by the way was the only live event I went to, so that one has a special place in my heart. Um, Wait, was no, sorry, the one after this, but that was the first live event I purchased. So this was like the first live event I had to watch live. I had to watch in the moment. So this was the first one, live event I purchased, and it definitely delivered. This rivalry has a special place in my heart. I love, and part of the reason why it's so high in my opinion is the Nerd Chronic promo, especially the last Nerd Chronic promo for Irwin versus Merle was just so good and built up the rivalry and like I really, because you always know you're getting a great match. These are two powerhouses of the league, and like I love rivalries between faces in some ways, and this was the best one in my opinion. This was the one where I was like, they're both kind of good guys, if you will, but they're both so good at what they do, and they're both so titans that it's like it really felt like a heavyweight match, almost like the Golden State Warriors 73 win season versus the Bulls with Michael Jordan. That's what it felt like when you were getting this match, and I just always was extremely excited and because these really felt like two of the biggest powerhouses knowledge wise and just in the game. Just the combination of they both were incredible competitors in every match. And the fact that the first one was a blowout and then Merle came back and then won the next couple and then Irwin won
Mm-hmm.
at the end. It just like the way the rivalry went. I just truly enjoyed this match.
You always knew when you were getting a match with these two that it was going to be high quality.
Yeah.
And you're right about the Nerd Chronic promos. He nailed the promos for these matches. And just some of the most high quality matches that we ever saw in the Schmoedown were between Irwin and Merle. They were fantastic competitors. And I think you're right that this is probably the best rivalry between two babyface characters in the Schmoedown. Just fantastic.
And also, funny enough, like they both went heel the final
They
season, and we
did.
never got. So it would have been funny if
We,
like they were both baby faces the entire rivalry, and then they both turn heel at the same moment and then face each other. That would have been fun.
yeah, that would have been fun. All right, so let's talk about my number 3, and you got to tell me why you cut this. Chandler versus Smuts.
Yes.
Um, just a phenomenal rivalry in the Inner Geekdom division. That this is how Chandler turned into a mega heel was against Smuts and his "it'll all be over soon" comment when he beat him for the title. And then we of course got the unfortunate news that Smuts had been diagnosed with cancer. I was at Spectacular in 2021 when Smuts made his return and confronted Chandru on stage, and that's my favorite moment from the entire Spectacular. Just the excitement and the tension, and Chandru on stage dressed like the Joker with writing all over him and stuff. Like it was so perfect, and just their back and forth, even though it had to be sort of surrounded by this unfortunate illness that Smuts had and thankfully has recovered well from. Just it's my favorite inner geekdom rivalry, and so that's why I put it number 3.
So the reason I cut this was twofold. Number one, my number 3, I realized at the last moment, I'm like, I need this number 3 in here. I just
Mm-hmm.
absolutely need this number 3 in here. And I was like looking at the things to cut, and I was like, I didn't want to cut the Shannon Winston one because like that was my favorite manager rivalry. And I was looking at it, and I was thinking about the Chantry versus Mets one, and the reason I cut it is because like Chandru versus Mets feels like Chandru, like a lot of it's almost like Chandru had so many rivalries within the league that it's almost like too many where none of them stand out to me more than the other. And Smets was the biggest one because of that comment and because of that moment. And people also forget that before Chandru turned heel, I believe he played Smets as a face in a number one contenders match. So like that was also a very interesting one where Smets almost lost that match and didn't get to play Kalinowski. And so it's a very interesting rivalry. Like this is my number 6, but the reason I personally cut it, and I think it's a great rivalry, I definitely like it was a hard cut, but because Chandru had so many rivalries with everyone, it's just like because it didn't feel as special as the other ones in my head because Chandru had a rivalry with almost everyone. Like if I almost consider putting
Yeah,
Chandru
he
versus
did.
the league or Chandru versus the fans because
Yeah,
it was like it was everyone. He was going after everyone at one point, and it was like I, like all these rivalries felt so unique on my list. And the Chandru versus Mets one, that was the one where I was like, I love it, but also it, like it's also very similar to Chauncey versus Kalinowski. And it's also very similar to Chauncey versus Winston. And although Chauncey versus Winston is a difference in some ways, but
yeah,
you can even argue Chauncey versus Hannah is up there as well. Like there's just a lot of like different rivalries with Chandru, and because there were so many, that's where I was like, that's why I'm cutting it is because of that, if that makes
yeah.
sense.
I understand that. I went with Chandra versus Smets, obviously because I was in the room for that moment and I felt how
Yes.
electric it was and everything. But also because like he only played Kalinowski once.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't feel that way, but he only played Kalinowski once. He played Robert Parker twice. He played Smets 4 times, and I think it was he played Mara twice. Like there were some big matches that Chandru had as a heel that could have been a great rivalry, but the one against Smets is the one that stands out to me in that group. So
Absolutely. This is definitely like my number 6 where I'm like, I want to have it, but like I just like
yeah.
my other 5 have like a place in my heart. And this one I love, but it doesn't have a place in my heart like the other 5 does.
Okay, so let's talk about your number 3 then.
So this is the one I had to cut Chauncey versus Smets for is Kalinowski versus Smets because I remembered I was like thinking about Smets' hit while I was preparing for the show. I was thinking about Smets and his career, and I was like, wait a second, I can't not have Kalinowski versus Smets on here because that rivalry people don't talk about it, but that first Kalinowski versus Smets game, in my opinion, should be considered for one of the greatest matches of all time. Just of
I agree.
how accurate both of those players were, the arc of that match in that moment, how it was so heartbreaking for Smets in a way, and how even though I think he was trying to be played as almost a heel, if you will, in that moment, it almost flipped it because it's like you can't not feel bad for the guy after he clearly knew the answer and he clearly had it, and he just says the slight wrong thing, and then the redemption, the work his way up, and then to go in the same season fight Kalinowski for the belt and to be as dominant as he was is
Mm-hmm.
just like that whole arc alone is enough for me. Where I'm like that, I think there's so many story beats. There's so many it ripples across the league almost from that match and from Smets's rise and like that one always felt special to me. That rivalry between
Yeah.
Smets and Kalinowski. It just every match felt special. Every match felt like an event. It honestly, I think that spectacular, if I remember correctly, even though it wasn't the last match, it felt like that the most excited, the most hyped match of that spectacular was Kalinowski versus Smets. That's the one everyone was looking forward to. And again, that first match is like up there for greatest match of all time. It's just so incredible.
Yeah, I remember that spectacular, and I can't remember if it was the last 2 matches, but we had 2 knockouts in championship matches in that
I think
spectacular
it's the
because that was
Bateman one.
also
It was the
it
Bateman
was the
Oyama one.
Bateman over Oyama. and Smets beating Kalinowski. Um, they had some phenomenal matches, especially that first match. The don't tell Peter moment.
Yeah.
Most people in Schmoedown, you just tell them, don't tell Peter. They know exactly what moment you're talking about, unless they're newer fans. And then Smets coming back and taking the belt off Kalinowski in the final season was a phenomenal moment as well. So
It was a rivalry where it felt like it changed the courses of Smeth's career just because it felt like they were building him up as this heel, like impossible to beat, like competitor, and then it's just like after those two matches against Kalinowski, it's just hard to root against the guy. It was just like after him winning the belt, and like it felt like the whole crowd was cheering his name, if I were, it was just cheering for him for just what being able to bounce back from that don't tell Peter, and just how beloved he is within in the community. And it was that felt like, okay, we can't really make Smets a heel, so let's make him a face with an edge, if you will.
yeah, they tried really hard after that match against Kalinowski to make him a heel, and it just didn't work. Not work. Okay, let's talk about since we just did number threes backwards. Let's talk about your number two.
Okay, so this is John Roca versus Dan Murrell. This John Roca versus Dan Murrell, the first one was the first Schmoedown match I ever watched. So that alone gives it a very, very special place in my heart. But it really felt like it's so interesting because this is one of the rivalries where they kind of start off as enemies and then become friends and then become enemies again. They were teammates, they were champions together with the founding fathers, and just to see the arc between it, and to see, like, I was always a huge Merle fan and I wasn't a John Roca fan, so every single match I just had a clear investment where I was like always hard in on Dan Merle. I actually remember like I it's like anytime like Merle would lose to Roca, it would actually like put me in as not the first one because I was just getting invested in the Schmoedown, but like after that,
Mm-hmm.
it was if there was any moment in the rivalry between Roca and Merle, especially after Roca betrays Merle, and when and keeps with Dagnino on the Finstock exchange. Anytime Merle would lose any edge to Roca in the rivalry, I physically like got annoyed, and it wouldn't ruin my day, but I'd get in a bad mood because of it. Like if
Yeah,
we're talking about emotional attachment, this is number one. Alone, just my personal one. It's just you knew these two were great competitors, great knowledge base, knew the games, and just like these are two of the players that kind of like started at the beginning and went all the way to the end, basically. And so like Roca and Merle, they've got to be up there for like most matches of all time, definitely, just because of how often they played, all the seasons they played, and just like truly like it's two powerhouses of the game that you just have to respect in every match. Again, like every Kalinowski Smets match felt like an event. Every Roca versus Merle chance they played against each other felt like an event.
absolutely. This, in my opinion, was the first really, truly great rivalry in the Schmoedown from when I started watching it in season three. Their matches, I remember that first match I watched between them when Roca beat Merle, and Merle just waiting because he knew he'd got the answer wrong and pointing to Roca because he knew Roca was about to win. And then the respect these two had for one another to team up as the founding fathers and go on the run that they did as the founding fathers. They were a really dominant tag team there for a little while, and I loved that in the end we went back to the rivalry. And I just one of the things that was missing for me in season 9 was Roca. Not that he was necessarily my favorite Schmoedown player or anything, but Roca brought an energy, especially when it came to interacting with Merle, that just wasn't really felt by a lot of the other, by me at least, from any of the other competitors. He had an intensity when it came to these matches and this partnership and rivalry with Merle that I felt like the Schmoedown was missing in season 9. But just a fantastic rivalry between these two.
Yeah, and I'll also just quickly say, as a Merle defender and as someone who rooted for Merle against all, Merle won a lot more times than Roca. People forget this. I will just quickly like put that out there. Like,
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, listen. I clearly am biased and clearly have a horse in this fight. I just said, I rooted for Merle every single time, but it really, and maybe I'm remembering it wrong, but it felt like Merle won a lot more than he lost against Roca.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Merle definitely beat him in singles more. I don't
Yes,
remember what their tag team
I
record is up against each other, but yeah, it
yeah,
does feel
Merle
like
didn't
Merle
play much
came out on
tag,
top
so it
in this
didn't.
rivalry.
Yeah,
Okay, let's go to my number 2, which is top 10 versus team action. They played twice. They were 1-1, but this rivalry ended with the tackle heard around the Schmoedown world. Andrew Guy tackling Roca shocked the hell out of me when I watched that for the first time. I was not expecting it to get physical. I know it was all planned and everything, but I was not expecting it to get physical. And I just loved their back and forth. Team action were, the cocky heels, and top 10 were kind of heels, but also not nearly as annoying as team action. And I just remember absolutely hating Andrew Guy after he tackled Roca. And I didn't even know why, because, like I just said, Roca was not necessarily one of my favorite players. But it sent Andrew Guy down a path of being a heel in the Schmoedown that I think was really perfect for him as a role to play. And I think that this is one of the shorter but more interesting rivalries that we ever saw.
absolutely. I mean, it's one of the only rivalries that got physical. I remembered they got a spectacular match where there's a whole contract involved about like stipulations and stuff like that. What separated this rivalry in some other ways is that like almost all four competitors were all in. Like you could feel Roka's
Mm-hmm.
intensity, but you could also fear. Not fear. I mean, here you could, or I'm trying to think. You could feel Roka's intensity in any of his matches, especially against Team Action, which there clearly was like, I do not want to lose to these young kids. And then with
Yeah.
at Bayman and Guy, they were so in on the bit and the character. They were so in on being the bad guys and the annoying guys, and they were so in on that. It was really interesting for their commitment to their character versus Roka's intensity for the game and for winning, and especially to not losing against Team Action.
Yeah, and
And
you could tell Nost didn't want to lose against Team Action either. Like they had an intensity about them, Roka more so, but they had
yes,
an intensity about them that was palpable.
yes. There was, it really felt like there was tension on both sides. Like both sides clearly did not want to lose to one another. And you also, if you look at the teams division at that point, we didn't have the Shire Wolves yet. We didn't have did we have, was that the beginning of Above the Line? I'm trying to remember. I think that was the tournament before Above the Line.
Um, I think it was the year before Above the Line, or it
Yes.
was the
So
same year as Above the Line. Let me double check.
yeah, I'm trying to remember. I think it's before, but the years sometimes like mix in together. But
It was
like,
the year of the first match between Above the Line and the Patriots.
God, it was the year of the first match. I can't remember if it was the same or, but like, it really felt like as this rivalry was coming up between Action and Top 10, it felt like that. Oh, because these two are like the top two teams other than the Patriots. Like these weren't just like they were like real contenders. Because if you were to ask a Schmoedown fan up before Above the Line, who do you think has the best chance against the Patriots? It would probably be Top 10, Team Action, Wolves of Steel. Like those would be
Yeah,
the three.
yeah,
Like, and that first tournament match between Action and Top 10, there's so much going on. There's like, it's underrated how good it is, both for the trivia but also for the character, and how it really built the rivalry between the two.
it did. It really did. I love these matches between these two teams, and so that's why it's my number 2 rivalry. Before we get into our number ones, let's hear from Justin on how you can help support the channel.
Hey guys, it's Justin, aka Hambone, just here to let you know a couple of things that we have going on with the channel. One, we have a Patreon. If you can and want to support us, you can do that. As little as $1. You can join the Discord. We also have a merch store where you can get some cool shirts, mugs, and stuff with all of our different shows and labels on there. And thank you for all of our supporters that have already been there with us.
That's patreon.com/LGR_network if you're interested in helping support the channel. There's a link to that and the merch store down in the description of this episode. All right, Josh, our number 1 is the same, and it is Mike Kalinowski versus Rachel Cushing.
I think this would be a lot of people. Like, if you were to poll Schmoedown fans, what is your favorite rivalry? It's like, I bet you like 60% would say this. Or like maybe 50, but like it would be a large amount.
It would be a large amount. Let's talk about this. They played once in singles. Rachel won in a 3-way with JTE. They played once in teams, and Kalinowski won with Corruption in the Shire Wolves last match. But their trilogy of matches in IG, I think, is where this rivalry really lives and breathes. That first that live match, the Schmoedown Throwdown or whatever it was called, where Rachel was up a lot and then Kalinowski wheeled her back in and it went into overtime. That was one of my favorite Inner Geekdom matches that ever existed.
I mean, we're talking about a lot of the theme with these rivalries is they have argument or like up there for greatest match of all time, and this is definitely one of them. Where every match felt like such an event. Like, for example, even if we'll go to quickly talk about the singles one. The singles one, if you remember, Kalinowski lost that match by a lot. And that was basically the turn of Kalinowski, the heel. That match alone, because he lost so badly, his team wasn't there to support him. And it was such it definitely felt like he also knew in the back of his head that, this rivalry between Cushing could be a thing. And like, as soon as he lost, he's like, people forget that's the match where it's like, this is the beginning of the corruption, and the Mike Kalinowski heel turn was that match because
he lost by knockout in that match.
And then the teams match is the polar opposite, where it's the end of Rachel's career. Kalinowski it's the beginning of him as a champion, and that's another match where it felt like the turning of the like Shire Wolves had a very dominant teams run, and then it was like, okay, now Corruption won the belt, and now we're going to see a new era of champions. And that Corruption Shire Wolves match was absolutely fantastic. Respect on both sides, clearly, for and both sides not wanting to lose. But as you said, the IG matches were absolutely incredible. The first one was very early and Rachel won, but then you just had those 2 championship matches that like both of them can be argued for greatest match of all time. They are both so incredible, have you on the edge of your toes, and it's just like 2 powerhouses in the IG. Kalinowski probably being considered the GOAT or by most people, but also Cushing up there. Both of these are like, I wouldn't be surprised if a couple people have Kalinowski as their best IG player and Cushing as their second, or even flipped, or in some order. These are 2 of the greatest IG players ever. And it felt like these 2 almost like, if you're talking about reasons why the IG division succeeded to this extent as it did and had so many great competitors, whether it's Mark Anopic, Kevin Smex, Chandru, even going back to Jason Inman in some ways. Like, I felt Inman was great, but if you're asking me why the IG division was able to sustain itself so easily and become honestly one of my favorite divisions, like if you're asking me, there are moments I like IG more than I like singles, and there were seasons where I'm like, I wish we had more IG matches and less singles matches, because I want to see like this IG match play and this match play, and like, it's because those Kalinowski and Cushing matches were so good and so great to watch. And like, without this rivalry, I'm not sure if the IG division is the same, or if it's or if it's like as frequent if it becomes as frequent as Star Wars in some ways, because that rivalry in a lot of ways is like what really made me extremely invested in IG.
I agree. Mike and Rachel played the last 2 matches of Rachel's career against each other in the teams match and the IG match at Comic-Con in San Diego, which was one of the first live events that I really had to watch live. I couldn't just wait for the replay. Rachel and Mike had the utmost of respect for each other, and you could tell. But they were also very competitive and wanted to beat each other. And I know we talked about Rachel and Mara being one of the greatest matches of all time, if not the greatest match of all time. But the Schmoedown Throwdown match between Rachel and Kalinowski, God, it's up there.
It's up there.
Really, really up there. It's my favorite Schmoedown Throwdown match they ever did. I remember watching that live too. Just they had such phenomenal careers against each other, and they're the reason the IG division lasted, I think, because there were a lot of like that first IG tournament. There were a lot of blowouts in the opening rounds, but everybody was like, "When's Rachel going to play Mike?" And that was the year that Mara came in and upset Rachel. To a certain degree, Mara's fantastic, obviously.
Yeah.
But I loved Rachel being able to reach that point of being the IG champion, beating Mike. I think it's great that Mike eventually took it right back off of her a few months later. I think it's only fitting that their great IG rivalry is with each other. I wish they would have played more in singles, or at least one-on-one in singles. I think that would have been really fun and interesting to watch. Because Mike was just not on his game in that three-way with JTE. But the teams match against each other was also fantastic, but highly emotional because it was Rachel and Clark's last match. And you knew if they lost, this was the last match, no matter what. I wanted them to retire with the belts, but that didn't happen. They just phenomenal rivals.
Absolutely. And you're saying you want more singles matches, but I think that also kind of like shows the career both of these players had. These were two players that honestly, if you look at their careers, it felt like a lot. They valued IG and teams more than singles. That was the divisions that like they truly loved and they had the most success in. Like, and that's also what made it great, because singles is if we look back on the Schmoedown history, a lot of it is dominated by singles. But the fact that this rivalry kind of like wasn't a singles rivalry, it was a teams and IG rivalry, and that it was mostly IG, but like also at the end there with that teams match is like that teams match was the perfect way to end the rivalry as well. In a lot of ways, it gave like that Shire Wolves versus Corruption match gave fans closure. It gave fans closure in a lot of ways. It ended it was the end of Rachel and Clark retiring, but it was also the end of the rivalry, and it was the end of the Shire Wolves. It was just great close. That's almost like a perfect way to end the rivalry like this, and the end the match or end two players' careers.
It was fitting that it was Mike,
and
Chance, obviously, but Mike that ended Rachel's career.
Absolutely, and also like this was like that winning that match against the Shire Wolves, I think put Corruption in a level of teams. Like I think a lot of like Corruption is not often talked about as the greatest team of all time because Shazam and the Patriots and Above the Line and just Shire Wolves and the competition is so stiff. But I truly think Corruption is in that conversation, especially because of the win against the Shire Wolves. But they are an incredibly consistent and dangerous team that are multiple time champions, and that was the first time they won that team's belt, and that win almost put not only Corruption but Mike Kalinowski in a different level of like legacy status, if you will, by winning that team's belt and not just being an IG champion.
It did. I would argue that Mike Kalinowski is definitely on the Mount Rushmore. I would argue Rachel is definitely on the Mount Rushmore.
I also agree.
And in my opinion, they're the first two on the Mount Rushmore. Like, I can't tell you which one I think is better out of the two. I think Mike ended up with the better IG career, but I think that's kind of only because Rachel retired. Rachel, I think, had the better teams run with the Shire Wolves but Kalinowski's run with Corruption was fantastic. And they both had a little bit of single success. Rachel a little bit more than Mike. But these are two phenomenal players who had a fantastic rivalry, and I think it's fitting that we both came independently to the conclusion that theirs was the best.
Yeah, it's like the rivalry. If like another sports analogy, it feels like in some ways Jordan versus LeBron, where Jordan had a much shorter career than LeBron, but man, when Jordan played, one of the most dominant players of all time. It's like everyone, like the whole league almost was fearful of Jordan. And I feel like the whole league, when Rachel Cushing played, was just extremely fearful of Rachel, just because of how dominant and how great, just the pure knowledge and how great she was at singles, teams, and IG. And then with Kalinowski, he doesn't have the same dominance as Rachel. He has a lot more losses, but like the fact that he was able to continue that level of success for so long, play so many matches, a lot of like the greatest matches of all time. You like if you're listing the top 50 greatest matches of all time in the Schmoedown, I bet you at least 50%, maybe like 70, like 60% has Mike Kalinowski in them. He has such a storied career. He has played for so long. He has been at the top for so long. It feels like there was never a point where it was like, oh, he's not competitive. Just like it's similar to the Merle, where he just kept playing and just adding up and adding up and adding up these accomplishments, where it's like it's almost impossible if you're doing a pure stats thing to kind of like discount Kalinowski, just because of how consistently good he was and how dominant he was in IG, but also teams.
Absolutely. So that's our number 1 and our top 5 best rivalries in the Schmoedown. Great lists, I think we came up with. Yes. Let us know what your lists are in the comments below. We'd love to see them. And Josh, where can people find you?
If I'm here on LGR, I'm on the Nostalgia Crackdown every month. I'm excited for next month's episode. You can also, if you watch the Fantasy Football Roundup, you can see my team bye week. We're on a surge. After bouncing back from Adelia over here destroying me, absolutely destroying me, but in our match against each other. But I might appear on the Fantasy Football Roundup another time if my team can continue to win. Maybe you'll see me in the playoffs, and maybe I can make another run. But just supporting LGR is supporting me. I'm going to probably appear on more LGR stuff, whether it's Marvel, Schmoedown, fantasy football, and I'm here. I'm here and I'm happy.
Yeah, we just did reviews for season 2 of Loki together with Danny and Snark. So check those out on the channel now. And you can find me on this channel every Friday night with Ferris Mythana, the Open Table, 8 p.m. Pacific, talking about whatever. This week we're talking about our differing tastes in music. If something doesn't come up and make us postpone the episode again, sorry about last week. And you can find me on the Highlights channel on Tuesdays at 3 p.m. Pacific, doing Starting 11 with Snark, our English Premier League recap show, and back on the Entertainment channel every Thursday, 3 p.m. Pacific, for the Rewatchers Council. We're rewatching every single episode of the Buffy the Vampire Slayer series. We're on episode 5, I believe. So we have a long way to go. There's 144 episodes. So we will be back next month for another episode of Nostalgia Crackdown. And until then, we're out.
It's for real.